Hello, Phil Conrad here for Computer Science 156. This is Spring 22. Today is Wednesday, May 11th. Last Thursday in lecture, I recorded a 75-minute lecture where we went through an introduction to front-end development. And what we did is we took one of our CRUD models from our TIMO2, and we added on top of it a front-end page that would list all of the records in the database. And where we stopped was we did not do any testing. So the feature worked as expected, but we had not thought about testing yet. So what I'm going to do is in this video, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to remind you of where we were in the last video. And then we're going to walk through how we do testing for the front end. So I will share my screen. And let's go to the code base. So let me open this up in VS Code. So here we are. Let me make this a little bit bigger and move this over and CD up a level. So we're at the top. This is the starter TIMO3 code. So when you work on TIMO3, you'll be working in a code base that's built off of this. And I'll open this up in VS Code. And let me close this other VS Code window. So where we were last time, we were adding this dining commons table. And if I run the application on localhost, so let me leave this window as the window where we'll do our get operations, and I'll open two other windows. On Mac, Command-T opens a new window in the same directory. In this one, I'll do Maven Spring Boot run. And in this one, I'll CD into the front end directory, and I will type npm start. And I'm going to make another tab here. We'll use this one for our testing, but like for the actual formal testing. Remember that when you do npm start, it brings up a browser window, but it brings that up on localhost 3000. We need to hop over to localhost 8080 instead, where I can click the login button and log in with my UCSB account. And under Dining Commons, list Dining Commons, this is what we were working on. So you can see that we've got one record in the database. And if I want to test, I'll open Swagger in a new tab here, go over to Swagger, go down to Dining Commons controller, and I'll use my post here to put in another one. I'll try it out. We will put in the fictitious Munger Hall. One thing that I found is if you don't, and this is kind of, I think, a bug in Swagger, if you leave these unmodified as true, it won't like it. I'm going to put in a fake latitude and longitude here. I actually don't remember what the real ones are, but that's close enough. And we'll call this Munger Hall fake. And I'll hit execute. Notice it doesn't like this, but if I change it to false and then back to true, I'll do that with all three of these, then it should be fine. And let's see, sure enough, I did execute and we got back code Munger Hall and everything is there. So now if I go back over to my React app, you can see I didn't even have to refresh the page. That's what's beautiful about the React libraries that we're using. It actually is constantly kind of polling the back end periodically to see if there's any change in the data. And it just comes in beautifully like that. So this is a reminder of what we worked on last time. Now, we had made all of those changes in the code. And just as a reminder, what did we change in the code? Well, under fixtures, we added these Dining Commons fixtures, which is just some sample data that we can use in tests and stories. We added under main, we added a Dining Commons table component. And we modeled this on another component that also had the ability to do delete and edit. We can bring some of those back in later, but that's why there's a lot of commented out code here. Oh, what the heck. Let's go ahead and just bring back, see if we can bring in the delete column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this. I'm still going to comment out this line right here. But what this says is columns, if you're an admin, all of the columns you had before, but also add a delete column. And then we'll uncomment this line, the columns that we're going to display. If you have the role admin, we'll use the admin columns, otherwise the regular columns. This line of code we won't need anymore since we have this line. Let's see, is there anything else that we need for, yes, here for deleting? What we're saying is that the delete mutation, oops, we need to, that's a comment. The delete mutation is going to use a backend mutation, and it's going to go to, we have this cell to Axios params delete. Now this is, I think, a function we're going to have to write. And then we have on success, on delete success. Do we have a on delete success function in here? I'm looking to see. Here we go. We have this delete callback. And I think that the, yes, here we go. Cell to Axios params delete, non-delete success from main utils, UCSB date utils. So I guess we're going to take a different direction in this video. I thought we were going to focus on testing, but I guess first I'm going to show you how you add the delete function. Since we've got a lot of commented out code here, and that's not really a good idea, let's go ahead and just figure that part out. I think we're going to need the hasRole function that we commented out before, because we're using that down here to determine whether you're an admin or not. And let's see, what else do we have in here? Yes, current user. That was unused before, but now it is being used. So we'll take away the underscore that notes that a variable is not being used. And now that gives us current user. So I think that's good. The use navigate is only for the edit function, so we will still leave that commented out for now. We'll leave that commented out up here. Oh, and the striker enable all. This is how you disable mutation testing for a particular section of the code. It turns out, for reasons I won't go into right now, that doing mutation testing on this particular bit of code is really hard. We don't quite know how to do it yet, so we're just not doing it. This is how you turn off mutation and turn it back on again. You can also turn off strike and mutation for just one line of code. And just to review, in the Java code, we used PIT. That was the framework we used for mutation testing. In the JavaScript code, we're using something called Striker. All right, so we've made the changes. My hope is that with these changes in place, if we go back to our web app, all right, so we see button column is not defined, line 64.9. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on there. Button column. I think button column is something that we should be importing from our table. So here we have our table. I think what we need is comma button column. As a review, imports that don't have braces around them, those are the default exports. So if we look at main components, our table, and we go into main components, let's find it. Here's under source, main components, our table. You can see that our table is the default export, but we also have down here another function, button column, which is the one that we use to add an edit or a delete button. That one doesn't have a default export, and that is why when we import it, we put the braces around it. Okay, so with that in place, oh look, we have a delete column. Let's see if we can delete Munger Hall. Delete, and what it says is required request parameter ID for method parameter type long is not present. I think I know what's going on here. I think what's happening is, first of all, I think we may not have written some of the code that we need. If we go back over to here, this cell to Axios params delete on delete success main utils UCSB date utils. Let's see whether that exists. So if we look under, we do have a UCSB date utils. And we do indeed have these two functions, so that's not the problem. I think the problem is this. We're passing in params ID, cell row values ID, but I think that that is not the parameter that's needed by this delete routine. Here's why. As you may recall, when we defined our database records, there were two ways of declaring the ID. So let's go back to the back end for a moment. And I'm just going to close up the front end directory and go back to source, main, Java, entities. And under entities, we can have an ID that uses this generated value where the ID is a long, but we can also have an ID. In this case, our ID is a string and it's code. This is what prevents us from, let's say, putting in two different records that both have the code Ortega in them. So for this particular table, we need to make sure that when we do the delete method, I think the param needs to actually not be this. So let's take this function and let's go back to our USCSB dates index page. And instead of importing, let's see, here, oh, not sorry, I want the table. Where is our table component? UCSB dates, dining commons table. This is what we want. Instead of using this cell to Axios params delete, we're not going to import it from there. We're going to put it right here. And I think the param that we're going to want, actually, you know what, we could have done it in that other file. But let's just try it here and see. I think the param that we want is code, and I think we want cell row values code. I think that's what we need. Let's take a look. If we go to our Swagger, let's go over here on Swagger UCSB Dining Commons Controller and look at the delete method. And indeed, the parameter it takes is called code. So I think that may be what was happening here. Let's see whether, with this change, whether this now works. So if I go back to the home page here and go to UCSB Dining Commons and have a delete function, let's try deleting Munger Hall. Okay, required request parameter ID for method parameter type long is not present. Okay, so let's see again what's happening here. So when we do this, columns if admin, we have a button column here. We have a delete callback. That delete callback comes from where? Right here, delete callback, and it's calling delete mutation dot mutate of cell. The delete mutation is defined here, and it has this cell to Axios params delete, and here's our cell to Axios params delete, and we're passing in cell row values code. I am stumped. So I'm going to pause the video for a moment and see whether I can figure out what's happening. Okay, I found it. So basically what's happened is we have not yet had a case where the button column was using a record that did not have an ID field. So I think what we need to do here is we need to try to make a change to this button column function that is backwards compatible, but will allow us to use a field other than ID. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say ID field equals ID, so that will be the default. And all of the code that in the past used ID field as ID will still work. Then I'm going to come down here, and instead of .id, I'm going to use this syntax, ID field. That should be identical to what we had before, but it will allow us to pass in to this something other than ID. For example, code, for the case where the ID field in the database is code. So since we've made this change, this gives us a good opportunity to show you how to run the tests to make sure that by making this change, we didn't break anything. So let's do that. Let's go to a front end, and here's what we do first. We do npm test. This will run only tests on the files that we have changed, and what I see is that looks like everything works. UCSB date with ID 1 was deleted, that's fine. Now I can click the A button. You can see here, press A to run all tests. I'm going to click A to run all the tests. All the tests pass. Now I'm going to Control C and I'm going to do npm run coverage. That will run test case coverage. I expect that there will be some testing coverage gaps. And indeed there are, and they are with the Dining Commons index page, which has no tests written for it whatsoever, so that's as expected. But what's good is that the our table component still has 100% test coverage. So this is the power of having good test coverage. We were able to make this change and get some instant feedback to know that we didn't break anything. Just to be clear, if I put in something here like foo, I would expect some tests to fail. Let's just see if that happens. npm test. And indeed, we have failed tests. If I go back here and put in the right thing, which is ID field, with a default of ID, the test should pass. And beautiful part about npm test is if you just sit there, it'll just run itself again. You don't have to do anything. Look, they all pass. If I go in and change this to foo, it should break things. And notice it noticed that I changed the code. It reran it again, and yes, the tests are failing. Change it back to ID. And the tests all pass. Excellent. With that in mind, now we should be able to do a button column in our Dining Commons table. And our button column, we're going to add here, comma, code, because that is the ID field for this button column. So let us see now whether our app actually works. So I'll go back to my React app. I'll delete Ortega. Okay, we still have required request parameter ID for method parameter type long is not present. Interesting.